In this video, we're going to be testing out the all-new Dieselite water-to-air intercooler for your 7.3 PowerStroke. Now, unfortunately, this video ended up being significantly longer than I had initially anticipated. So we've separated this into chapters, and you'll be able to see that in the timeline below as well as in the description in case you need to jump around. So chapter 1, we're going to be going over the why. Why did we purchase this product, and what separates this from the rest of the competition? We'll then be going over the installation because we found some significant problems that you're probably going to run into unless things are changed with the design. We then go over the initial test results. Now, if you're just interested in buying this out of the box, you could probably stop the video right there. But we have another chapter here where we perform modifications to the unit to see if we can push the performance that much further. We'll then have a final test result here to see if our modifications actually improved over just the out-of-the-box unit. And then we'll kind of have some final thoughts here at the end to tell you whether or not I recommend this product as is. Now, a water-to-air intercooler has several advantages, and theoretically, water-to-air intercoolers are significantly more efficient than an air-to-air intercooler. Now, the Dieselite water-to-air intercooler is not cheap. Currently, at the time of making this video, it comes in at $1,599. And you can find it on Dieselite, Complete Performance, Full Force Diesel, I think XDP potentially, and your other diesel parts warehouses. Now, on top of water-to-air intercoolers potentially being more efficient, the one benefit that I see with the Dieselite kit here is that it is incredibly compact, which should help us out with fitting everything in here without having to cut any of the core supports. Now, most of the kits that you can purchase online today are air-to-air intercoolers, and those work fine. In fact, you can find them on the early Super Duties. In fact, most of the kits that you can purchase online are just a Super Duty air-to-air intercooler that you fit in the radiator. But one of my concerns with that is that we already have several layers of radiators here, and you're putting another thing to sandwich in here that's going to limit the amount of airflow that's actually getting to the radiator for the antifreeze and the motor. So theoretically, one advantage that the water-to-air intercooler from Dieselite may have is that the radiator is significantly smaller and will take up less space inside of our already existing radiators. So you can see in my current setup, I have a transmission cooler. We have the radiator for the AC. And then way in the back there, we have the radiator for the engine coolant. So if you haven't already, I would recommend checking out our video where we compared a standard K&N cold air intake to the S&B cold air intake. Reason being is that that video sets up a lot of the foundational data that we're going to be comparing against so that we can find out if the Dieselite water-to-air intercooler actually works. Now, if you haven't seen our previous video, we tested this S&B cold air intake and found the results were actually pretty surprising, and I like this kit, so we're leaving it in here. But we tested two things. For one, we tested the temperature of the air by the time it reached inside of the cold air intake. This is going to give us our heat soak. Now, when the air is traveling down through the cold air intake and into the turbo, we have to remember that a lot of the intake side is leaching temperature heat from the exhaust side. So you can see we have another ambient temperature sensor there, which is measuring the air as it's exiting the turbo. That's going to give us our foundational knowledge so that we know how this truck performs without an intercooler. Now, it's also important to note that gas law states that if a gas is pressurized but the volume stays the same, the temperature will increase. And this is the primary reason why temperatures increase so dramatically after a turbo is done compressing that gas together. Okay, so before we can begin installing this thing, we need to start removing our old plenum setup here. And just as another disclosure, if you guys haven't seen my other video, we're not going to be using this plenum anymore. So you'll notice this is just JB weld. Don't do this if you plan on doing something like this permanently, please. This was just for testing, and we are taking it off right now. There we go. It's supposed to sit something like this. Oh boy. So I have the Irate Diesel kit, and this line is not wanting to work very well with this thing. Might be able to see it's kind of intersecting here on this corner where this line actually goes. Okay, so that's always part of the complications when you start stacking aftermarket stuff together. For one, in the instructions, they don't show that their truck has, I think this is an oil sensor here. I have one of these, and it's kind of in the way. Relocating this is going to be a lot harder because it's on a copper line underneath, so that's going to be a no-go. But I have an Irate Diesel e-fuel kit on here, and the line is actually making contact with this corner of the bracket here. So I think what I'm going to do is just take my cutting wheel and start trimming this guy off so that we can fit it underneath here without it actually rubbing and causing any fuel problems. Maybe if I kind of do like half and half. So one concern I have already is that this guy is actually making a small amount of contact with this other pipe here. So it's not the end of the world, but I really would have liked to have seen a lot more clearance between these two. And I mean, they are pretty dang close, so. Okay, so this is issue one that I'm having with this guy. So if you look at the bracket here, look at how tall it makes this guy sit, and look at how tall it is compared to everything else. Like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to shut the hood like this. Like, it's actually touching right here to right here, and I'll show you that here in a second. But look at how much taller it is than just the alternator. Like, it could be to about that cap height, and that's it. That's all we got. Okay, I had to take the evening to really think about this, but here's my problem with the bracket they designed for this. It makes the cylinder here sit way too tall, and I just did another test fit, and you can see the welds here are touching the top. Now, I can remove this insulation here. However, I saw a Facebook post, and I'll link his stuff down below, thank you for posting online, where he's having the same problem. So we're gonna have to modify this bracket because this bracket's just no good. So we're gonna have to figure out how to drop this down, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking potentially maybe I can reverse that bracket so it brings it down by about 1/4 inch, and that might be enough. You can also see that because I have the Dieselite kit here, I had to basically remove quite a bit of material. There was like a big hump here that was rubbing, and I do not like things touching my fuel lines because, you know, that's just a rule of thumb. Okay, so now you can more or less see the shape that I've had to cut this thing down to. So for one, we had to take this shoulder down. It was basically square up, so I basically cut all that material off, and it's just aluminum, so cutting it isn't too hard. I used a cutting wheel, and then I just sanded the edges so it's nice and smooth. And then for this end, we put this upside down, so this bracket's supposed to go on the top, but we need to be able to drop this thing so that it's sitting a good 1/2 inch lower. So there's a little shoulder here that I did the same thing with, cut this off, and they threaded these so you can just screw it to the bottom. And then I went ahead and sanded that shoulder off. So now when we go to put this thing down, I've got this backwards, but just so you could see, now we have enough clearance here where I can actually drop this down a good 1/2 inch. So now you can see how we basically have the bracket kind of sitting on top now instead of on bottom, which will hopefully give us enough clearance. If not, after this, I'm not really sure what to do. We'd have to start grinding away here to try to alleviate more space. I'm hoping this is enough. Let's find out. Nope. Set this right in here, just like that. Come on, baby. Just need a little bit more space. Oh man, that might be it. Okay, we have a very subtle touch, but man, that's a lot better. That shuts way better. All right, you guys tell me if it's touching.
No! God, please, no! No!
Well, after reviewing the footage, it sure is touching still. So we're gonna have to do a lot of trickery here to get this to work. Oh man, it doesn't need much though. We're getting really close. Okay, I need to bring you in here for what I'm doing because modifying this bracket is turning into a bit. So I've taken that shoulder down even more so that we can clear the cylinder. Now remember that the bracket's supposed to sit on top. The problem is it's pushing it too high. So we're going beneath, but it's still not enough. So what I went ahead and did is I filed this down some more. That's about as much as I'm willing to go. So all in all, we maybe got like a 32nd or maybe even a 16th of an inch. So not a ton of material off here, but enough to help. You'll also see that I filed down there because this is gonna give us a little bit more bite room when we go under here. And I started looking at this to add a shim. So we're gonna need to make something in between these two brackets so that it can lower the cylinder even more than it currently is. Now we don't need much. So I'm hoping I can make something like a shim to go in between these two, which will basically just drop it down. Okay, as a quick recap, I had to add a shim, we had to shorten this shoulder, and I had to file away some more off camera here. That way we've got enough of a space between the cylinder and the bracket so that they're not touching, because you don't want them vibrating and then, you know, slowly eroding a hole into the cylinder. And then we had to file this back and we had to pull this shoulder back. So it's been a lot of modifications on this bracket, but I'm hoping this will do it. Attempt number 563. There's been a lot of attempts off camera here, guys. I'm trying not to bore you with all the like trial and error that I've been having to do. Nosferatu! Okay, another test because the battery on my light here on the GoPro died. So test number 500,622. Go. Okay, so looking at the footage, it looks like the corner of this insulation where it kind of dips out a little bit is the thing that's kind of pushing on this a little bit. And I can always rip some of that out. So I think I'm happy with this. It's not pushing it down a ton, which means I could take this back apart, paint that little piece, and then we can start funneling everything back. The cool thing about this too is last night when I was just needing to take a break, I was thinking I was gonna have to relocate the relay because I was thinking I was gonna have to flip the bracket upside down. But take a look at that. I have enough clearance, there's no electrical issues. Like, that's pretty sweet. So I like this setup. So far, everything is very well built. The welds are nice. It's just the measurements of this bracket really could have been a lot better. So, you know, what are you gonna do? Hopefully the company sees this and they're like, shoot, we need to make some changes, because in other words, you're gonna be just like me making a ton of modifications to this. Okay, so now that we have everything more or less where we want it, before I put on the water to air cylinder here, I wanna start by filling these holes. And what's really cool about this product is they already welded in bungs for various sensors, and this is the one we want for the ambient air temperature sensor that I'm using, but the rest of these we can pretty much plug up. They're not gonna serve me any purpose, and we want to do that before we start getting everything in here so that it's a lot easier. And I've gone ahead and taken these little copper fittings that they include, and I've wrapped them in some Teflon tape, some plumber's tape, just to ensure that they don't leak. So, got our map sensor here with some more Teflon tape, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this in here where it goes. And this is important because remember, we had this plugged into essentially the plenum Y immediately after the turbo, giving us the temperatures of the heat. But now we're actually going to be able to go through the intercooler and see how much the temperature is actually, basically to see how much temperature drops from the intercooler working. So it's going to be a pretty cool test. I'm looking at places to mount this. Now it looks like the instructions actually want us to mount it immediately behind the grill, and it's small enough that it actually wouldn't impact the performance of this that much. But this version of truck is called an arrow nose because of the bumper. You've got all these little rectangular and square cutouts that allow even more airflow into the motor. And I think I could take advantage of that. If we look here on the bottom, this looks to me like prime real estate. Now this is primary air going to the motor that we have all on the bottom and the sides. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, you know, I think we can get away with actually mounting the intercooler here against the bumper. And I think the reason why that might be a good idea is because, for one, it gives us enough space between the other radiators and the one we're going to be installing. But two, it's small enough that we'd be getting direct air inlet from right here. The only bad thing that has me second guessing this is that the fan, primarily the clutch fan, is right here. So it's primarily pulling air on the top of this grill, which means at idle, we're probably not going to be getting as much of a pull as we would like. But once we're going down the road and enough air is pushing through here, I mean, we're going to be getting a direct air source for that radiator right here. The other thing too is I'm looking through here at my core supports to see if I were to put it here. Really, my only places to install this are actually on the bumper here. But the reason why I'm not liking this is it's all plastic on this side. And then on this side, I don't have any core supports on the right. So I would have to get super close onto core supports for here, and then I would have nothing down below. Where if I actually bolt this thing to the bumper, I mean, it's bolted to the bumper, there's not going to be any movement there, and it just feels like it's going to be a much more solid location. So here's a look at it through the grill, so you can see how it's gonna get all that air blasting through it while we're driving. Look at that. I'm really liking this spot a lot more. I know it's not completely flush because my bumper's a little bit crooked, but so what? That's gonna work, man. And then if I ever need to take this off, since I've got bolts here, I can actually undo the clamps and lower it. What I'm doing now is getting this hose prepared here. Now you can see where I ran this one. It goes right up here, goes right up into this hole here, and then it comes out right behind here. So really what I want to try to do is do the same thing with that guy. We're gonna run here and run up the same deal, and we'll be able to use our stock little I don't know what these are called, the little clips, because it fits perfect. So that works out really good. Okay, next order of business is going to be these guys here. These are the entrance and exit, or it might be the other way around, I don't remember. But these are the points in which the fluid will enter and exit. I just don't know what direction yet. So I need to grab the little pipe fittings. We'll Teflon tape those and get those in here. And then we have to figure out which one goes where, because the instructions, the way this was designed, is to go into our heater core hoses here, which is fine. We're gonna test it the way they want us to test it, but then we're gonna make some alterations, I think, that will improve this. But before I start cutting hoses and putting stuff on, I'm gonna have to get everything prepared here, because as soon as we undo those heater core hoses, it's probably gonna make a little bit of a mess. Freaking wind's starting to pick up. Okay, let me take you where I messed up. So there's 2 points, right? You got a right and a left. The right is the one that's going to connect to the right of the tank, which I already took care of. So the right is going, see how there's two? The one on the right connects to the right of the tank. So it's coming up this way and it's connected there. The one on the left of that is this guy, and that's going to connect up here. So this is one that I have to hook directly to this guy. Okay, so change of plans. Having a hard time getting this off of the heater core without damaging it. And the one thing I'm worried about is if we damage this, then I'm working on a heater core, and then potentially we're leaking antifreeze inside of the cab of the truck. So I was really not wanting to cut these at all. I was wanting to leave them stock. So really two options. My dad was saying, you know, we could just cut it here and work the back of it off, and then we could put this back on the same spot. Basically the same idea that I was wanting to do, but cut it here. But I'm still worried about damaging the inlet of the heater core here. So I think I am gonna do what the instructions say, and we're just gonna cut it and put it, the T, about here. And then when we're ready to rearrange stuff to repair this, I'm just gonna have to get one of these, but basically not the T. And I'll be able to put it in line here and put clamps. I was not wanting to do that because now we're just introducing more potential failure points, but I don't see another way without potentially risking damage to the heater core and causing a whole nightmare of other problems. All right, no time like the present. Go. Now, when we start this truck, we're gonna lose quite a bit of fluid here, so I'm gonna have to pay attention to that, to this guy, and have some antifreeze on standby. I think I have some. I think I might have enough, but we'll see. And it's gonna be burping a lot too, I imagine. So let me get cleaned up here, connect the battery, and then we'll give it a try and make sure we're not leaking anywhere. Okay, I think we're ready for our first test start. Honestly, I'm a little nervous. I've got tools over there on that old tractor so that if I spot a leak, I can tighten something really fast. I've got this ready so I could shove under there if we need to, and I've got coolant because I know that this system's going to use more engine coolant, so we're going to have to fill it up from right there. As we start it, we'll kind of see that level drop, and I'll fill it in as we go. Looking pretty good so far. Not seeing any leaks. So to kind of show you where I'm just not sure if this is a good system or not, is you can actually feel these hoses warmed up because it's circulating antifreeze from the motor. Even though it's going through this little radiator, we're still using antifreeze that's getting warmed up by the motor. So I can feel the antifreeze that's being circulated into this cooler is warm. It's not like scalding hot, but it's warm. So theoretically, the air that's exiting the turbo should be hotter than the temperature of the antifreeze, which will cool it down. But I don't know, the data's gonna have to speak for itself. I'm really excited to see if this actually performs or not, but I'm even more excited to see if we could get this thing to really perform with its own antifreeze setup so that the antifreeze is never entering the motor and it's not being warmed up by any of those factors. I'm actually really excited about that.
Now, in order to record our temperatures on our 33-mile test route, I had previously installed this glow shift digital gauge here, and it has two indicators here. The top one is going to be the temperature that is at the intake, and that ambient air temperature sensor is installed directly behind the air filter. Now the bottom one is going to be for the temperature that is exiting the turbo, and that sensor is going to be located after the turbo and after the intercooler. That way we get the temperature of the air as it cools from the intercooler. Just note that in our previous video where we collected some of our baseline data, that sensor was actually installed in a Y plenum that is no longer on the truck. Okay, so to view the results, you're going to see three different points of data here, guys. First, we're going to have heat soak. This is going to be that orange color. And this is just the average temperature increase of air from the intake. Now, it's important to note that these numbers are never going to be zero, even on a cold air intake, because the ambient air temperature inside of the engine compartment is hot and it leaches into everything. So you want that number to be as small as possible, but it's just never going to be zero. Next, the second point of data that we have is in red. This is going to be the average turbo temperature increase. So we are measuring the air after the turbo's done compressing it, which is going to tell us if the intercooler is working or not. Now, the sensor for the water to air results is going to be after the intercooler, so just an important note. Next, we have in blue here, this is going to be the sensor difference. Now, this is cool. It's not vitally important to determine whether or not our intercooler is working, but I think it's really cool to see how this averages through the test, and all it is the temperature difference between the intake reading and the post-air turbo outlet temperature reading. So it's just the difference between those two. Little note here before we review the results. These are the water-to-air intercooler results. So when you're seeing the SMB and the K&N results here, just note that that's just with an SMB intake with no intercooler, and that's a K&N intake with no intercooler. Now, the water-to-air intercooler scored a 92.4 average for the air exiting the turbo. That is phenomenal. Look at the SMB and the K&N readings. So yeah, guys, this tells us right now the water-to-air intercooler 100% works, and it does improve the temperature of the air that's getting thrown at the intake. So this is awesome. Now, the thing that is really surprising to me though is take a look at the heat soak. So we've got a heat soak of 8 on average with the water-to-air intercooler, 11 with SMB, and 19.5 with K&N. I don't know why that improved. I have no idea why that is significantly better than the SMB results. I suppose technically, since the engine's running a little bit cooler, maybe those ambient air temperatures are now lower inside of the engine compartment, and maybe the compressor spooling more efficient, so we're getting more air sucked through the intake faster. I don't know. I can only speculate. All I can say is that for some reason that water-to-air intercooler improved our heat soak on the intake, which that's phenomenal. That is an amazing result. Okay, so now let me draw your attention to the second half of the graph here, where we just basically look at the loaded results. And again, this is where it's most dramatic, where the water-to-air intercooler really shines. I mean, take a look. We've got 107.2 compared to 134.5 compared to 149.5. That is a significant increase in performance with that water-to-air intercooler. And again, we see the exact same thing that we see with the SMB results, where loaded, we actually get an improved heat soak, and we see the same exact thing with the water-to-air intercooler results. So we are getting an even better heat soak reading when we're under load. And this I can't explain. I can't explain why we are seeing better heat soak conditions with loaded tests. And you have to remember that when we are unloaded at 75 miles per hour with this truck, we're seeing boost of about 5 to 6 psi, where with loaded, we're seeing boost from 6 to 8 psi. So we're 100% getting through air significantly faster, and we're decreasing dwell time, which means that the air that's entering the intake doesn't have as much time to heat up. Even more interesting, I want you to just look at the results here for the Dieselite water-to-air intercooler loaded. Because if we compare the loaded test to an unloaded test of the K&N and an unloaded test of the SMB, it won. It beats those results. So this is the bread and the pudding, guys. This is all the evidence that we need to say that a water-to-air intercooler 100% works. The fact that I can be pulling a load and get better temperature results than unloaded with no intercooler. Like that, that to me is absolutely amazing. So this is awesome. I am pleasantly surprised and happy to report that this product does work, but I still have a concern, and that concern is that we are using coolant from the engine, which is, no matter what you do, going to be warm, right? And so I think with a bit of modification, we can improve these results. And what I would like to do is separate the coolant here. I still want to use antifreeze, but I want it cycling on its own system. I don't want this coolant that's used for the water to air intercooler to ever be in contact with the engine. That way we can keep the temperature of the antifreeze down even more. And another concern I have with this too is that if for whatever reason I develop a leak or a catastrophic failure within the water to air intercooler system, that means my entire engine is potentially at risk. So by separating this system, we ensure that if there is a catastrophic failure with the system, the engine isn't affected. Now, a particular safety fail point here is if there's a catastrophic failure inside of the coolant cylinder, because that means you're probably going to be sucking up antifreeze. So it's really important to watch for that. But I still think that it's going to be significantly safer for the motor and more efficient to separate these systems. So let's get into how we can modify this system to improve its performance that much more.
Well, I didn't do my homework enough and ran into a little bit of a problem. Now, I chose a Bosch pump because all over online people are using these for water to air intercooler setups, and it seems to be pretty well proven. I did have some reserves about this being plastic, but we'll see how this works. But the real issue I ran into is I could have swore that the inlet and outlet for this pump was 5/8, which is actually what the interior diameter of our coolant lines is. So stepping down to a 3/8 would be no big deal. However, when I started putting this thing together, the outlet and inlet for this pump are actually 3/4, and we're stepping all the way down to a 3/8. So you can see how big of a drop that is. I'm hoping that's not too much resistant on this pump. From what I see online, people are doing this actually kind of a lot, and this pump doesn't create that much pressure. So we should still be okay for our setup, and I don't want to convert all of these lines to 5/8 or larger, because I actually like this size for being able to get into the places that we need to. So we're going to try this. So I've just got a step down here from 3/4 to 3/8 with some 3/4 inch tubing here. Unfortunately, I didn't have the tubing or the step down, so I had to order all of that. So that took a few days. But now we've got an inlet and an exit. You can see the arrow pointing out there, so we know that that's going to exit. So now we can start doing the messy part, which is start wiring all of this together. Okay, just wanted to give you guys an update. Everything fitting wise in the space is coming out really nice. The cool part about this location is that I'm only using factory holes that are already there. We're not drilling anymore in the truck, anything like that. However, I did find once I started bolting this in here that I've got this bracket here that connects something like this. You see there's a body hole already right here, and so I basically connect it just like that. But what I was finding is that after I gotten it all buttoned up, it still wiggled a little bit too much for my liking. So I made a thicker bracket, and it has a very subtle wiggle, like it wiggles like maybe like that much, and I can live with that. And so that will hook up something like that against the body, so it will help it from wiggling too much and touching our AC line here. And it does not touch under there. I did have to bend it this way just a hair, and I am gonna put some of like this wire loom or something around it just in case. It doesn't even touch it even when it wiggles, but you want to play it safe just in case. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint this guy up, and if it dries tonight, then I'll be able to start doing some leak tests. Okay, one thing I wanted to show you guys that I'm deciding to do is you can kind of see how my reservoir here sits just above this AC line, and I'm lucky enough that it doesn't actually touch, but just in case as a precautionary measure, I took some of this leftover 3/8 line and put basically a slit right through it. I'm gonna slip this over the AC line just in case, that way nothing gets rubbed, we don't rub a hole in that line. Nothing touches. The only thing that I'm concerned about is if it were to vibrate hard enough, I've got a my little hose clamp under there could potentially touch it if it were to go hard enough, which it doesn't, thankfully. But just in case, I'm gonna put this on there with some zip ties just as kind of a future proofing, just in case kind of thing. Okay, we are letting all the bubbles kind of work their way through, and what's cool is this little reservoir has this little indicator so you can see how full it is. We're about 3/4 of the way full. I expect that to drop once we basically what I'm going to do now is wire in the electric pump, and we're just going to kind of very briefly turn it on to purge it, because probably what's going to happen is there's going to be some air, so it's going to kind of suck it through like a straw, and it will lower this level, and we'll just kind of keep playing with that level as we go. These are the wires for our pump here, so I'm going to go ahead and get these prepared, and these have marks to tell you which side is positive and which side is negative. Put this back on so dust and stuff doesn't get in there. I'm going to turn this on just momentarily, and let's see what happens. Okay, I can feel it vibrating. You see that moving around in there? You can hear all the air. Kind of see it in there. That is awesome. So we're gonna let this run for a little bit to get rid of all the air, and at the same time I'm just gonna be running around here checking for leaks. Okay, we are not stopping with our modifications there. I've got this nifty thermal covering that we're also going to be putting on all of the antifreeze tubes here, because I want to try to keep as much radiant heat out of this thing as possible. All right, got it all cleaned up and ready to go. About to start her up so we can begin our testing. You can see here I put this like thermal wrap over these tubes here. Hopefully the idea is that we will try to eliminate as much heat soak from the engine into that antifreeze as possible, which should in theory contribute to better performance out of this water cooler. But we don't know. That's why we're going to do this test. So I've got it all the way over here on both sides, and I've got it on the bottom side, and that leads over behind and goes up, and it's all thermal wrap too. There's a few spots I wasn't able to thermal wrap because of spacing, but looks pretty good. And this is just kind of a cheapie online, but I kind of like this little tube on the side here. Well, we'll see if I like it, if it lasts. But it kind of is like a little indicator here to tell you how full it is, which is kind of cool. I also got a new V-band clamp on the turbo, because I noticed that the inlet here, the little connector that goes to the compressor side of the turbo, my standard 2-inch V-band clamp like barely fits on this thing, and it's like holding on for dear life. So I got a 2.5, but one of the issues I had with it off camera is you can see here that I kind of had to smush it a little bit. So this test is also going to be making sure that we don't have any turbo leaks. If we do, I got to come back, put on the old one and do the test again. But I'm hoping this works. It actually goes like, it almost touches the V-band brackets here, are almost touching, which I like, because then you get full clearance all the way around, but the little circles here are basically smushed together. But it ain't going nowhere. Seems like it's pretty solid. But the Dieselite brand here is like pretty thick, and it's a bit taller than the normal Y plenum splitter that usually comes out of here on the stock setup. So it would be cool if Dieselite included a V-band clamp that actually like fit this setup just a little bit more. This is just an Amazon cheapie for now, so that's one thing I will note. I did spill a bit of antifreeze when we were changing over from our heater core lines here, and I did have to replace this line because initially I was trying to take them off from here, but they were so stuck that I couldn't get them off, and I actually made a very tiny little hole, so now we shouldn't have any more leaks on this side. But yeah, we need to bleed everything over. So let me go ahead and get this warmed up, and then we'll get started with our test.
Okay, I am excited by these results. This is awesome. These results mean that all of the work and all the modifications and all, frankly, the money that I had to spend to modify this thing was 100% worth it. Oh, it's nice. It's one thing to have a theory to say that I think it's going to work, and it's another thing to see it on paper to 100% know that it works. And take a look at our results here, guys. Again, we see a dramatic heat soak improvement on just the unloaded side of the test here. 5.6. That's the lowest we've gotten so far. That is phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. And compare that to the 8. So again, I don't know why we're improving heat soak here. All I can assume is that we're decreasing the overall ambient air temperature inside of the engine compartment, and we're spooling our turbo significantly better. It's freaking crazy. And then, I mean, look at the difference here in the turbo temperatures. 61.7 is what we were able to get this down to. So we already saw an improvement of 92.4 with just the water to air intercooler installed, but making these modifications, look at the drastic improvement from here, from 92.4 from 107.5 to 61.7. Like, that is such a massive jump in performance. Like, that is awesome. I honestly, I thought we were going to be somewhere like in the 80s, and I am blown away at seeing 61.7. On average, through compression, through the gas law, through the leaching exhaust temperatures through the turbo, we are only increasing air temps by 61.7 degrees. Oh, man, that is so cool to see. And a relief too, because frankly, it's been a lot of work. Now let's take a look at the loaded test here. So let's take a look at this side. And here's what's interesting. We've got a 5.6 score on the heat soak, and that actually directly matches up loaded versus unloaded. So we might have actually reached the threshold of how low we can actually get our intake temperatures in this truck, which is very cool to see. And I mean, look at the loaded test results. 88.7 on the turbo temperatures compared to 107.2 compared to 134.5. Like, that is phenomenal. That is crazy good, crazy good. And let's do the same thing that we did on the previous test results, and let's just look at the loaded results for the modded water to air intercooler system that we did. And look at how, like, it improves versus the unloaded scores. Loaded with weight, with the modifications we've made with the water to air intercooler, we are running better temperatures than with just the plain Jane out of the box water to air intercooler unloaded. That is amazing. That is phenomenal. Like, you guys got to get one of these. Like, that is freaking awesome. I am so stoked with those results. That is a dramatic difference. Absolutely insane. All right, so final thoughts for you guys. We have to answer the question, is the Dieselite water to air intercooler worth the purchase? Before I answer that, I think that we can say definitively that our test results have shown that getting an intercooler period is going to be a significant upgrade for your truck, especially if you're running it hotter with bigger injectors, bigger turbo, if you're towing all the time like we are. But yeah, guys, I think it's worth it, but with some caveats. The actual build quality of the unit itself is phenomenal. The welds are fantastic. The material itself feels sturdy. But there's some flaws. For one, the bracket that we saw during installation, 100% garbage. That has to change. We spent an entire day modifying that just so that it wouldn't touch the hood, and it still like barely touches the installation. And there's plenty of room for that thing to drop down, even with an aftermarket glow plug relay like what we have. So that needs to change. So I hope that Dieselite actually sees this video and starts making those modifications to that bracket to be a little more universal to the OBS trucks out there and to bring that whole cylinder down. The second kind of big hurdle that I saw with the unit just out of the box is that it's a really weird band clamp size from the turbo to the elbow that you have to install. And you'll see some of that footage in the modification chapter. But basically the standard 2-inch V-band clamp that comes with the truck is too small. And if you upgrade to a 2.5-inch V-band clamp, it's too big. So it's somewhere in between a 2 and a 2.5 size-wise. So it would be nice if Dieselite would include a new V-band clamp, period, but more specifically, they either need to make changes to that adapter to the outlet, or they just need to include a V-band clamp that's going to fit the unit nice. Also, kind of a third picky thing, and that's the location of the small radiator that the kit comes with. Now, they technically want you to install it in the grill right in front of your AC condenser, like the AC radiator. I have a transmission cooler in that position, but most OBS trucks actually have like this black plastic frame that's inside of the grill. I actually didn't have that, so the location of that little radiator made it a little difficult, and you're going to end up having to make some modifications there, guys. I kind of think that Dieselite needs to look for an improved like bracketing system that actually goes to the core supports to actually install that. That way it's not just screwed to plastic. So that's kind of a big drawback, is that no matter what you do, this kit is not going to be dropped in currently. You're not going to be able to just unbox it and install it. As much as we would like that to happen, currently there's going to be a lot of modifications that you need to make. And for the price tag, it's expensive, guys. I really feel like it should be including some of these things so that it truly is drop-in. And who knows, maybe the company will actually see this video. It's a brand new product, so I imagine we're going to be seeing changes down the road. But anybody from Dieselite, if you are watching this, contact me. Like, I will go over what I did to help you guys improve the product for your customers in the future, because we OBS people need companies designing stuff like this. So we do support you here. Now, there's one more point that I would like to touch base on, and it's kind of an unspoken advantage with this water-to-air intercooler setup. And it really revolves around whether or not you are operating your truck within winter months. You see, since the Dieselite is using antifreeze from the motor, technically speaking, during the winter, if it's negative 10 degrees outside, you're actually warming up the air as opposed to cooling it down. So theoretically, you could help your truck warm up a little bit quicker, and it could be healthier for your engine in the long run, as opposed to an air-to-air intercooler. With air-to-air, you're just taking the air and you're cooling it off, and that's it. You can't turn that off. And so those are some things to think about. With our particular setup, we are no longer using the antifreeze from the motor. So in the winter months, when it comes down to us warming up the truck, all I have to do is turn off the water pump, and I won't circulate the antifreeze anymore, which means the air won't cool down, and we'll be able to warm up the truck that way. But we do lose that advantage that the Dieselite product comes with right out of the box. So definitely some things to think about. I've definitely also been thinking about potentially some kind of a transfer switch where I could actually determine if I want the antifreeze separated from the system or not. But that would also kind of go back to the issue of why I wanted them separated in the first place. And that's so that if there is a catastrophic failure, I can separate those systems so that the engine is never damaged at that point. But honestly, the more I think about it, I think a transfer switch sometime in the future would be pretty cool. So maybe we'll do that at some point in the future when I financially recover after this test, because oh my God, this was expensive. Now, I already know that I'm going to be getting a lot of questions about EGT. That's your exhaust gas temperature. And yes, I do have a gauge. I did not include that data though, because my gauge for that is an analog gauge, and frankly, it's just not as accurate as a digital gauge. But I do want to point out that with every iteration of the upgrade, that's going from the K&N to an SMB, from the SMB to the water-to-air intercooler, and then doing the modifications at every single level, we did see improved EGT readings. Now, it's also important to note, though, that none of these are going to be a magic sauce for simply decreasing your EGT score, right? You're still going to get to temperature. Even with all of these modifications that we've done to the truck, we're still going to see the same exact EGT readings. The difference is with each iteration of the modifications that we made, it takes longer for those temperatures to get to that temperature. So as an example, going uphill with a significant load, I can get up to about 1200 degrees. I still get up to 1200 degrees, guys, with all of these modifications. The difference is it takes significantly longer to get to that temperature. So just something to note, if you're looking to specifically just cool down your EGT readings, you're gonna need a plethora of modifications to add on to your truck. So there's no magic sauce here. So I just wanna point that out. Now, it's also important to note that we haven't been paid or sent any free products to conduct this testing. SMB, Dieselite, or any other diesel manufacturer hasn't paid us for doing this test, for doing this review. So because of that, this was pretty expensive. We could use all the support we can get as a small channel. So if you could like, subscribe, share, and comment, we would greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, I want to hear from you guys down below in the comments. Would you install this product on your OBS truck? Do you have another product like an air-to-air intercooler that you're seeing similar results to? Let us know. I'm curious to see what you guys have on these vehicles. And more importantly, it's important that we really support companies that are coming up with these types of aftermarket products for our old trucks as well. So, you know, if you think that they did a good job, let them know down in the comments. Maybe they will send us something for free or something cool. We'll keep dreaming. But I also hope that Dieselite actually sees this video because there's some obvious improvements that they need to make to this product. But so far, we're fans, guys. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.